Woo! All right, Sovereign Tech Sweaties, baby. I know it's a little late at night when this got released, but hey, I'm here for you for a little Wednesday Q&A. Patreon only. Only the Sovereign Tech patrons get this stuff. All my Sovereign Tech Sweaties. The patrons, I mean, I don't want to create a class system here, but woo, man, I'm going to try and get through a bunch of different questions in this one. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on that, on any kind of opening. But boy, I do want to say there's a couple things I want to get out of the way. First off, there is a huge change going on with Patreon that in case if you ever become a creator for Patreon or you ever end up using it or anything like this, I just want you to be aware that it's happening, and it's pretty relevant to a Patreon episode. And that is that Patreon now allows for, so normally how, and this isn't going to affect, if you've been a Sovereign Tech patron for even the past month, but if you've been a Sovereign Tech patron for a while, this isn't going to affect you. But what happens is that, and I already set this up, if you get, when you sign up to patronize, to subscribe, to support whatever you're supporting on Patreon, like in your case, you're supporting Sovereign Tech. You don't get charged, like say you did it middle of October, say you did it middle of, I don't know, this coming January or something. Okay. If you did it then, normally what would happen is you wouldn't actually get charged until February 1st. Okay. So you could get access to everything ever made without paying a dime. All right. Between like say January and February. Now, if you canceled your subscription, okay, your Patreon subscription to whatever creator you're subscribing to, if you canceled it before February 1st in this example, you wouldn't have to pay anything, but you could have gotten all of the content, all of the Patreon exclusive content that a creator released. And this was considered by some to be a problem. I mean, I think there's been some people that have done this to me and whatever. Okay. I mean, yeah, if you have fun with my content and, you don't want to go value for value, well, okay, but whatever. So anyway, Patreon has been experimenting with for the past couple months, and they're still kind of experimenting with it, where you can actually set up the account to when a person starts subscribing to you, they pay right then instead of the first of the month. After they pay right then, it will always be first of the month, just as it always has been. So now and this won't affect anybody hearing the sound of this, okay, but going forward, if anybody else signs up for Patreon, it's going to affect them. When you sign up to become a Sovereign Tech patron, you will get charged for the amount that you want to sign up for up front. And so that means that if you want access to all this content, I mean, and hey, it's pay what you want. You could sign up for only $1, okay, and then you could get access to now. I mean, it's got to be over 100 hours of content. This is like episode 35, I think, of a Patreon episode, and I think it's the 20th Q&A episode, something like that. You could still get access to all of that for $1, but you're going to have to pay that $1 now. Okay, you can't like cancel mid-month, get all the stuff, and then cancel, like I said. So I think that's interesting. I understand the solution. So just to talk about this for a second, like I really think that what they, PWYW, pay what you want, I really think that's the economic model of the future. There are some platforms where right now, it is not plausible. Okay, and it's not even possible really to do based upon how the platform has been set up. So some things, the way I do it, like some games, like some of the games that I sell and all of this, like there really isn't a great way to do pay what you want. And so, there's some things where I don't think it can work, but I do think that it's the model of the future, and it excites me, and I like to take advantage of it. But I have to admit, okay, that there's one thing. This is something not that Patreon. Now Patreon's kind of doing it, But something that I really liked that Steam did, even though it's kind of against the pay, not really against pay what you want, but I think it's sort of a next level thing in our digital realm that I think it's a good idea to consider like implementing. Not that I can implement it, other than, kind of roundabout in the fact of how Patreon is having pay up front now. When you get new subscribers, again, it's not going to affect any of you hearing this because you're already subscribers, you're already paid, you're already on board. Okay. But one thing I like that Steam, or Valve more particularly, which is the company that runs the Steam, gaming platform, what they implemented is that to use certain features within Steam is totally free, and a lot of the games are actually free. But to actually use the platform, some like chat and some other, and like stores and other parts of the platform, you have to spend at least $5. Now, some people are like, "Oh, that's crazy. This should be a free platform and all this stuff." And it's like, are you kidding me? You're on a video game platform and you're never going to lay down $5? Like, really? I mean, in my opinion, that makes, it's a joke. Yeah, I mean, even people that play Candy Crush obviously lay out way more than $5. I mean, the most casual of gamer generally lays out more than $5, at some point or other. So, but what I like about that is that it really solves a lot of the spam and a lot of the noise, in the signal to noise ratio, proper, but, or prime, but, but, when they implemented that, I was like, that is brilliant, because instantly, like all of the spammy like messages that I would get on Steam were just gone. They stopped. All of the bullshit asks for, hey, do you want to trade this card for this and all that? It just stopped like that. So I kind of like where there is a very small, I don't want to say a barrier to entry. I mean, there's a lot of things you really don't want a barrier to entry for. But I mean, for a lot of aspects of podcasting, it's really not an issue, because podcasting is in a lot of ways a one-way street. Okay. so that, that's really not much of an issue there. But for some platforms, I think that's a very useful thing to have, is to have it's not necessarily a paywall. I suppose technically it is, but based upon the genre that you're dealing in, like if somebody doesn't even lay down $5, really, like, how serious, how much do you care, about that person using your platform? A part of me wishes really that like Facebook or even Twitter would somehow have that little $5, ask at some point in there. That way you could get rid of so much of the cruft. But, well, anyway, I think that's an interesting economic model to look at, and I think it can be integrated very easily into pay what you want, which is where I think a lot of economies or aspects of the economy are going. So there you go. Anyway, so with Patreon, again, this won't affect any of you, but going forward, anybody that wants to become a Sovereign Tech patron, they will be at least $1. They can pay more if they like, and it's great if they do, just as many of you do. Okay, they can pay more, but it will be paid upfront. That is, and probably you're going to see that happen a lot more with other patrons. They can choose for it not to be that way, but I just can't imagine that people aren't going to not want it to be that way, because you do have the people, and I'm not that concerned about it, but I get that a lot of people are, people that are more into IP and all that, which I'm not. I could see where they would see this as being very advantageous, to stop, what is in their mind scammers. I'm not calling them that. I can just see how some of these creators would envision people that way. Or, not scam, but I don't know, if you want to call them thieves, I don't even want to use that term. That's ridiculous. So I don't feel about it that way, but I understand why a lot of Patreon, creators do. But I think it's only good for the platform to have that, at least have the option. I think that's a wonderful thing. And talk about something that's really, I always say it, and I'm not going to go into a big diatribe about it, but Patreon is genuinely, I don't think people realize just how big a fucking deal this is. Like, like they're missing it. Okay. Forget about paying $10 a month for Netflix. Like, Patreon is going to be, just a prediction, as long as the inner workings, we'll say, at Patreon can just stay on the up and up and stay afloat, I think Patreon could end up killing almost every media platform out there, even Netflix, because you're going to have independent people that will create things for a set amount, and now you can't have people just like come in and because of the pay up front. I mean, I think that's just going to it's going to accelerate this fact, in my opinion, because a lot of other creators are going to want to jump on board with that. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point YouTube somehow implements a Patreon style system to where YouTube creators can create a subscription model. I mean, they can do that already through Patreon, but I can't imagine Google's going to want to keep losing that piece of the pie to where they do that. Like I donate to Threatwire, which is a part of Hack 5. I do donate to them, and you get an audio version of their video podcasts that they have on YouTube, which you can watch totally for free, but the audio version is nice. So I get that, and I think that's really great. That's handy for me because I don't always care to watch video, even though snubs, oof. But anyway, she's the host of the show. Just wonderful. So yeah, I could see YouTube implementing it because I'm guessing Google's got to know the writing's on the wall. I mean, that people can be guaranteed to kind of get paid for incredible content that they make. Oh yeah. I mean, Patreon is it's so fucking huge. Now, I mean, part of the thing is though, is that there's only, people only have so much money and so much attention and so much time, so not everybody obviously can have a Patreon, account, and everybody's just going to be paying everybody in, this one giant circle jerk. That's, that's really not going to work. But I think what'll happen is that, well, certainly the people that are getting on board with Patreon early, and I think we're just at the cusp of being early out of it. And if you're doing some kind of money on it, somewhere in the 3 digits, maybe, I think there might end up being some degree of a tier. Like eventually Patreon's going to do some kind of curation. They already do. They have a featured thing, but I think they're going to do more of that, including the fact that there is a ton, one of the things I really love about Patreon, I promise we'll get into some great questions, and we have some doozies. Okay. One of the things I really love about Patreon is how much it funds adult content. And sometimes even the really strange adult content. I think that is so important. And really, that's the part that a lot of people might even be missing about Patreon, is that you can effectively fund porn. And, and kind of get that porn. I mean, I suppose people would still be able to, very cleverly download video. All it takes is one person paying for it to download the video, right? And then they could put it up on torrent sites. But I think you could create a real, anybody just about anywhere could create a real multimedia experience around porn, and fund it with Patreon, because Patreon allows for that. I mean, believe me, there's crazy fucking shit on there. You think the Golden Stallion makes some wild stuff, but baby, you haven't seen anything. So anyway, I mean that could become a really big deal. In fact, honestly, in my home geographic area of New Hampshire, I could imagine it becoming a big deal because, of course, I mean, and granted, you could lie on Patreon, that's fine, but New Hampshire is one of the 2 states in the United States that allows for where porn is legal to produce. California, of course, being the other one. So I could really see that industry, and I've theorized about this too. I'm not necessarily saying I want a hand in it, okay, but or something else in it. But I've theorized that really at some point the porn industry is going to hit New Hampshire. It's going to take over some part of New Hampshire, and I think that's very exciting. Or people in New Hampshire are going to be very entrepreneurial, and they will get the porn business really up and running here. Now I know there's been a couple attempts. I can tell you that. I'll just say that much about it. There's been a couple of attempts, but I could really see that being a big thing. And understand, folks, porn can be done right. I am totally on board with the fact that a lot of the porn out there, is really, really shitty. I mean, for a bunch of reasons. I'm not saying the production levels aren't high. I'm saying that the content is very questionable. I mean, granted, value is subjective. I understand that. But you can have very, very respectful, high class porn, which porn used to be in the 70s and even previous. I mean, man, it was high art at the time. It really was. And to some degree, even like in the 90s when you had the softcore movement that was such a big deal, which I love. It's my personal favorite kind of, erotic material is like Skinemax, right? 90s softcore. That sort of thing could happen again. And I think Patreon could bring it up. And folks, once people know about like this kind of quote unquote underground porn industry, and I don't mean underground in a seedy way, no pun intended about CD, but once that gets, once that's funded and once people find out about it, that's going to take off. There's probably going to be, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if there was like mafia style actions against it. Because believe me, the porno kings, in California, who are already losing a shit ton of money, are going to flip the fuck out. Now, they might move into Patreon themselves, but I don't know how well that would work, because I think what makes Patreon so exciting for a lot of people is kind of the more homegrown aspect of it that I think would appeal to people in a certain way. Anyway, I don't need to keep going on with that subject. I just think the continual developments and the improvements to Patreon as a platform are so exciting. Like when they allowed you to get your own RSS feed so that you could download all of, like, say, Sovereign Tech, episodes, the Patreon only episodes, right into your podcast app. I mean, that fucking changed the world, in my opinion. That's so huge. So I love it. I love what's going on. Anyway, okay, let's get into some questions here before we run too late, because we're already like 15 minutes in. So, all right, first off, before I get into kind of the first question here, and we're going to have a couple tech questions, and we're going to have a relationship question, and then we might have a question about anarchism, and then we might even get into a review. We'll see how fast we can get past this. So a question I had set up, or that I had asked that's kind of been sitting, but now I feel compelled to talk about it and answer it, had to do with somebody saying that effectively, like, they keep hearing this phrase, and I've said it too on Sovereign Tech for years, because people have been talking about it for years, which is the post-PC world. And I mean, even like Steve Jobs would talk about it, all these different people, they talk about it all the time. And the person was effectively asking, like, what's my opinion on that right now? Like, is this still a thing? Are we really already in the post-PC world with the iPad Pro and all this? And it's a great subject to talk about. It's a great question to ask. And I feel compelled to talk about it because I'll tell you something. And like, this really threw me for a loop. It's been a rough few weeks for various reasons. Actually, it's been a rough few months, honestly. But I won't go into the details on that. But something happened that really, like, really kind of, and this is going to sound funny, but I mean it. In many ways, it shook my foundation. And that is that last night, so I'm recording this on Wednesday, November 30th. So on Tuesday, November 29th, the power supply in my big rig computer just like popped. Like, I went upstairs and I noticed my computer's off. I'm like, oh, what the hell happened? And I pressed the power button. Power won't go on. What the hell? I was like, okay. So I reached to the back of the power supply and I flipped, the manual power switch on the power supply. I flipped it on and off, okay, because it usually resets, whatever's going on in it. And then I turned on the power on the desktop, and boom, suddenly smoke. I mean, and the room stunk. Okay. It was bad. I mean, it like just smoke like everywhere. It was really, really rough. So the power supply went. I did not have a spare power supply. I actually went through my spare power supplies. I've been using this big rig for a while. It was actually a mining machine at one point as well. And so I was screwed, like, because I was in the middle of a ton of work. And this is really like the only machine that I have that has any good degree of speed at the moment. I'm trying to get my hands on like a Lenovo Yoga Book and all. Anyway, and maybe like an Alienware at some point, but whatever. Not things I can afford right this second. But regardless, this is like my main machine where I get work done. Okay, and so even just in the past really 24 hours, we'll say, that I haven't been able to use it. like I feel completely lost. Not because my other computers don't have access, to a lot of the things I need to do. I have at least, I have a couple that can make this sort of thing happen. But just like not having that speed, not having that raw power, and I mean the raw power to run multiple like web browsers, not tabs. Yeah, each web browser is going to have some tabs in it too, but to run multiple web browsers. And I need that because, say I'm doing something for a client or whatever, with Sovereign Text Solutions or whichever, like I am accessing, I don't like to meld my passwords, even though I can use LastPass and log in with multiple people and all that. I understand. Okay. I know I'm the golden stallion. Okay. But I don't like to, I like to have one browser that's my stuff. And then I like to have a browser or multiple browsers, and I use these other browser instances or sandboxes sometimes is what I'll use to handle client stuff, okay? And so just the ability to do that, I just can't do it on any machine any slower than my big rig. I am lost, and it actually kind of screwed my day. Today, and it just slowed everything down. It was such a pain in the ass. So my point in saying this to you is that we're in a post-PC world. My goddamned ass we are. Not even close are we in a post-PC world. And there was a time, where I thought that, well, okay, I can try. And I've done this multiple times. I've retried the experiment where I try to do everything that I do just using my phone, even the podcast to some degree, right? Folks, it's not possible. And while things could get interesting, Windows 10 Mobile, you can stop laughing. Windows 10 Mobile, they just came out, they just announced a new project being built into, it's probably going to be Redstone 2 or 3 for Windows 10 Mobile, where theoretically it will have an emulation layer that can run x86 software. Okay, so that means that a Windows 10 mobile device, like a Windows Phone or whatever, could run Audacity. And so you could hook it up with Continuum, which again turns it into a giant desktop PC, and then you could run Audacity. And they already showed off earlier in the year at various events, might have been at a Build conference, where Microsoft showed off how Windows 10 Mobile can do multiple Windows, which only makes sense since it has the fucking name Windows. That's why it has the name Windows, is because you could open multiple programs on the same screen. Duh. So putting those two things together, maybe at that point you could get to the stage to where you could run your life off of your phone. But then really it's not just on your phone. You're using a Continuum dock that connects to, a keyboard and mouse and maybe an external hard drive, Ethernet, and in a big monitor or something. Okay, maybe then, but as it stands with iOS and Android, no, it's not happening. And I don't care if they have multiple windows. It's largely not happening. Maybe an iPad Pro because GarageBand's so good and you could do podcasts on it or something. But really, folks, if you want to do the kind of things I'm talking about, we just are not at a post-PC world. And I don't know that we ever will be. I'm as time goes on, I'm more inclined to think that no, we need to really be rethinking and getting away from smartphones and going back to the laptop, where we have a lot more control of hardware. We have a lot more control of software. We just have a lot more control. And there's not 10 billion sensors on these things. Or if you want them, connect them through USB and then disconnect them as needed. Okay. Or, as an M2 card or something. I don't know. However you want to do that. Okay. So yeah, the post-PC world, I get it. I know people talk about it, but I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of people are coming to the realization, even in more mainstream tech news, that no, we're always going to have, our workhorse machines, and even the everyday person is really going to have that workhorse machine. And it's kind of funny too, because yeah, I think there's people who their only computer, their only, connected device is going to be their smartphone. I definitely think there's people like that. But at the same time, those are really going to become the people that were the people that weren't on the internet in the 90s. And they're not going to be able, in my opinion, they're large. Unless they're a very crafty and inventive person. I'm not, you certainly could be that. But they're not going to be able to take advantage of everything that is getting released today. So this idea of the post-PC world, nope, not happening. Like, it's not real. It's not even practical. And there's some funny things to be said about that. Like, I know Steve Jobs made the comments about, like, well, there's going to be purpose-built devices. Like, you're always going to have your trucks, right? And I guess in Apple speak, your truck would be like an iMac 5K, right? You're always going to have, you're going to have your different purpose devices. You're going to have your consumption devices. You're going to have this. Okay. And I can kind of see that, but to some degree, like where Apple is pushing things is definitely not the way Steve Jobs expected things to be. He made it very, as much as Steve Jobs loved touch, he never was saying you're going to get away from the mouse and the keyboard entirely. Like, really, he made that very clear. At the D5 conference, he made one of the best quotes. It's like, we still use the steering wheel to drive, don't we? Now, some people are saying, well, we're going to driverless cars, so that's going to end too. No, bullshit. Hopefully the market speaks and this whole driverless car thing just dies off like when it was tried in the 80s. People are like, no, it's completely impractical. So I really hope that, that happens again and the steering wheel will stick. Just like I think the mouse and keyboard are going to be around for a really long time. And they're not going to be niche. They're not going to be niche at all. In fact, ironically, really, Microsoft is the one that's actually kind of revitalizing the entire PC platform by finally making easy tools to create with. And if the whole world's going to go, or not the whole world, but if large parts of the economy are going to become pay what you want, that pay what you want, part of that is people being creators. And that, to be a creator, look, sorry, you're just not doing that on a phone. If you're just a consumer, well, then yeah, I guess you can get away with a phone, right? But I envision people, now that humanity has the tools, when humanity is given tools, a lot of times they take advantage of it, and I just hope that happens. Let everybody be a fucking creator. I think that's fine and dandy. So yeah, again, real sweet, or real short and sweet final statement. The post-PC world is bullshit. It's not real. It's not happening. And I am a super inventive and resourceful guy. And man, like. Without my big rig, without that speed, I just feel lost. And not just speed, but even like just ability to handle the load. It sucks, not everybody's me, sure. But I think there's a whole lot more people, that have work to do than not. Really. So that stuff's not going anywhere. And fortunately, in case you're wondering, I ordered, I overnighted a really great, very nice power supply. Thanks actually to Sex and Science Hour listeners, people that used the Amazon credit there. And I overnighted a power supply and it'll be here tomorrow. It'll be here Thursday, December 1st. So thank you so much, of course, listeners, any of you listeners involved in that, for allowing that to happen. Again, you keep this stuff running. You really do. You don't even know. So there we go. We did the question about the post-PC world. Now let's get into a couple other questions here. So, and this has to do with, well, we're never going to enter a post-reality world, in my opinion, either. But this has to do with VR, which is something else that the PC, I think the future of VR is in mobile, but it's in purpose-built devices, mobile devices, kind of like what Intel's building, and even AMD was building it. I think it was they kind of took their whole Sapphire program and put that into building headsets, VR headsets, where the computer is built into the headset, but they're lightweight and all of this. So I certainly think that VR gets exciting when it's detached from the PC. But one of the things that's going to allow people to build the entire infrastructure of the PC, kind of its growth phase, is going to be with PCs. And we're already seeing, with Windows Holographic, where that is the push, that is the direction, and where you're going to have very nice VR headsets and great VR experiences at an entry price of $300. That's how much the headsets will cost. That'll be the cheapest, and then you kind of go up from there, and they connect to Windows PC, and away you go. Hopefully Linux can do something similar. I don't expect Apple to give two shits about any of this, so I don't expect to see anything like it on Mac. But whatever, that's your choice. But yeah, so VR I think is really an exciting thing, and you already have interesting platforms out there. You have Oculus, you have Vive, and all this. So I got a message from a great guy who is a Patreon subscriber, and he recently, through Black Friday, ended up getting his hands on some VR equipment, and he shared his thoughts on it. And I want to share his thoughts with you because I thought it was really exciting, and he did a good kind of comedic take on it too. Captain's log, 2016, 11/26, 7:29. So 7:30 in the morning, or maybe that's at night. Anyway, yesterday I purchased a discounted HTC Vive with a GTX 1070, totaling a financially irresponsible $1,070 space bucks. $70 of space. Totes worth it. I'm convinced VR will quickly become the next level of gaming and porn consumption, and I'm happy to send market signals that this tech is desired. And I'll stop right there, Stan, breaking in. I applaud you, sir, because I agree with that entire statement that you made, and I love the fact that you sent the market signals. I will be doing the same in the very near future. So anyway, I just do that. Let the world know, yes, we want VR. And I agree. Gaming and porn is where it's at. Okay, I've played the Vive at a friend's house, and it was glorious. I was dodging, weaving, shooting, slicing, ducking, covering. Shit, I'd have rolled if I could have. The next version of the Vive controllers allow for full finger and hand articulation. Woo! He wrote in the woo. Have you spent some hours with the Vive or Oculus? What did you think? And then he made a comment about Black Mirror, which, folks, if you aren't watching Black Mirror, jump on that. Watch all 3 seasons. It is the modern Twilight Zone. I know it's cliche to say, but it's true. The last 3 or 4 episodes of the 3rd season are absolutely powerful. Some of the most powerful television you could ever watch. And I hate all things new. So I like to think that that's around, that's a ringing endorsement, I should say, because damn, was it good shit. So anyway, and then of course he says, "Hi, Stephanie." So, and I let her know that. But anyway, yeah. So I haven't really spent much time with Vive or Oculus. I have definitely covered the mobile options available, and I am very impressed with how it's happening, in mobile. But I do plan on, what I mentioned with the Windows holographic headsets that are coming out, I'm definitely going to be on board with those. Because they're more, for a few reasons. I mean, I want to get to a point, and if I'm ever at a show or convention where I get to test some of this stuff out, of course I will. But the 2 areas that I want to concentrate on is Daydream, which is Google's new VR platform, okay, and it's only on a very few phones. I think the Pixel XL, and the ZTE Axon 7. Even though the Axon 7 was billed as the first Daydream phone, but I never hear it come up in a conversation about Daydream. So I can't really confirm that. I'd love to get my hands on an Axon 7, but I'm not entirely certain that would work. So the amount of phones that work with Daydream seem to be very limited at the moment. But in just the past week, there have been a ton of apps that have been, there's a Lego app, there's a bunch of different ones, all Daydream VR. So the 2 main areas that I want to concentrate on are Daydream VR and Windows holographic. That's really where I'm going to put my money and time. If I ever, if fate, not that there's fate, but if things work in my favor somehow to where, I could get into, working with a Vive or an Oculus on a regular basis, I will certainly do that because those are the big platforms. I'm a little concerned about Oculus. I'll tell you, listener, I'm glad you bought a Vive because Oculus seems to be in trouble. That's, in my opinion, their future is really in the air, and it's a shame because I think John Carmack's awesome, who is behind a lot of Oculus. So they're kind of lying low. Maybe they're going to come out and shock everybody. I mean, Facebook's got plenty of money to splurge, and let this thing ride until they get it right. But right now it seems like the HTC Vive is really, really, where it's happening right now. Outside of course, say what, Galaxy VR from Samsung, which Samsung has its own problems. And of course Daydream, and then the upcoming Windows holographic. And I'm excited for what Intel's going to come out with their own headset and all this. So there's platforms that are very interesting. And especially when they get removed from the PC, that becomes, I agree, that's something that has to where you could do your barrel roll. that needs to happen. So, but I love hearing these stories about people's experiences with VR, because my experience so far is limited, even though I see the amazing potential for the platform, and I think it's really here to stay, even though some people question even that. So anyway, yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. VR, like I said, I see Windows Holographic being a huge deal. I see Daydream potentially being a huge deal. It's got to get put into more phones. So Daydream's future is questionable. I don't think Windows Holographic's future is questionable at all. I think that's exactly what the big push for a lot of creator stuff that Microsoft has been working on is really all about. And HoloLens and things like this. AR is going to be exciting, but VR is going to be a big part of it as well. So anyway, there we have that. Let's get on to, I think that covers it for tech. We've got 35 minutes. Yeah, let's get into some of the some of the more relationship, some of the more, I guess, philosophical questions, perhaps. But just before I do want to say thank you. A lot of patrons actually did message me or email me, letting me know, how exactly, like what are their thoughts? Because I asked last week, it's like, how do you feel about, when like a show is late, like, how important is consistency and all that? And some people messaged and said, oh yeah, consistency is absolutely key. So, which was my point, because 199C came out a couple days late. Anyway, thank you so much for your input. It's really, really helpful to me. Anytime anybody has input on the show, good or bad, it's very helpful. It lets me know kind of what the thought process is out there and everything. And actually, I want to tell you, there might be a whole lot of new listeners coming in the very near future here. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but it looks like I will be getting picked up by another affiliate, which will put the number up to, is this 5 or 6? Which is a lot. I mean, most podcasts are lucky if they're on one. Okay? Most podcasts aren't even on an affiliate. So that's... I am going to pat myself on the back. I'm very excited about this. And what's also great is that the affiliate actually reached out to me. So that's all the better, is when they're like, hey, we want you. Okay. As to where normally, you're schlepping off and you have to email out, and say, hey, would you like to pick up my show and all this? And I've been turned down. Of course, it was years ago, but I don't know if I'd get turned down anymore. But yeah, really, really cool. So I'll keep you all posted about that. So anyway, consistency is key. Consistency is one of the ways you get affiliates, because the affiliates can count on your show coming out. Okay. so yeah, definitely the message is we got to keep things consistent. All right, let's get into, this is kind of a relationship question. And it's a good one. So I want to get into it. And then maybe if we have time, we'll get into a question about anarchism that has to do with Max Stirner. I'd love to get into that. And then maybe we can do something fun at the end. So here we go. Hey, Brian, or let's see. He gave me thoughts on the 199C. Okay, so I'll skip that. I have one question for you. I live with my wonderful girlfriend, and we both sort of work from home. So similar situation as you and Stephanie. So the question is, how do you balance the time between work and the girlfriend? Cuddling, talking, eating, lots of sex, watching movies, ? Thanks. Okay, so to answer that question, how do you juggle the time, especially when you work from home? So Stephanie and I get asked this a lot because, we're known for working from home. And Stephanie has her voice work, which she does, and that's like kind of her main gig. She really doesn't, that's her one thing. It's where I have a multitude of jobs. I have clients that I work with. I schlep around sovereign tech. I develop video games. I make music, writing all the time. In fact, I won't give any of that away. But I have a billion jobs that literally that I do. Stephanie gets tons of clients. I mean, she is very much in demand, and she is such a success. It is such a privilege to watch her. I'll tell you, one of the beautiful things, I'm getting off topic, but I just want to say it. I mean, one of the beautiful things of working from home, when you get to watch your significant other, really, really, really do well, it takes such a risk. Like, she took a real risk years ago when she went, she's talked about this before on other shows, when she dropped out of, she got her PhD, but when she dropped out of the, the MD part of the program, she still, did the whole thing, with Dartmouth and all that. She took a real risk in doing that. And I'm going to become a voice actor. And it wasn't like, the money might not have been the best at first. It's scary, or at least it wasn't certain, right? And it's still not certain to some degree. You got to be that good. You got to have that talent that she has. And it has been I love being able to work from home. And I just adore getting to see her do her thing. That is so precious to me. It's a privilege to me, to see her, just blossom as this voice actor. And I think really, the only direction for her is up, and that has continued. So, I wouldn't be shocked if someday, she gets asked to be in an anime or even a video game or something like that. And then eventually, she gets into various guilds or whatever, and who knows? So that's just my prediction. But anyway, that's not what you asked. But I do love, getting to see that. But we get asked a lot, what's it like working from home? It's like, most people, what they say when we tell them that, or if they don't know, or they're just asking, they say, how do you get any work done? I'd never get any work done if I work from home. I'd be blah, 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 blah. Well, we kind of have the opposite problem. We're always working, or it seems to some degree, we're always working. We have the opposite issue. Not that, we'd never get any work done. It's that we often don't take a break to not work. The biggest break that we have is we sit down for dinner, and that can take the amount of time of anywhere from an hour, honestly, sometimes to 5 hours, maybe even a little longer. Or it could, on average, though, it's usually about 2 hours, that we stop. And then after that 2 hours, usually we go right back to work. Now, to keep things afloat, do we have to work that much? Yes. Yeah, kind of, really. Not to keep things afloat. I don't mean to sound like... Anyway, just to keep the ball rolling, to keep the momentum that we're building up, that we're both building up. It takes a lot of hours. That's what I mean to say. So how do you manage it? Well, how do we get stuff in? Well, dinner time also ends up being, TV or movie time to some degree. And I know some people don't like that. They don't agree with, you shouldn't watch TV while you're eating dinner, blah, blah, blah. Which, first off, we're never going to have a family, so it's really our choice what we want to do. But I think that's a totally valid thing to do, to eat. And I know some people are like, oh, you don't really taste the food if you're watching something while you do it. That is ridiculous. I don't experience that at all. So that's kind of when we get in movie time. Sometimes we stay up later at night, to watch something, to watch a movie or a show or something like that. I guess kind of the ultimate answer to a lot of this is really, just to kind of put it in brief, the answer really is that you can, when you're your own boss, so it's not just working from home, but we also have control of our own time, and we're kind of our own boss, our own bosses, I should say. You can choose to work a lot harder at certain points. And so you can take, this is kind of the advantage. So there's times where you can take, you could take more hours off if you needed to. And then just in the following hours or the preceding, you could just work that much harder to make up for that time. But that's more an aspect of not really from working from home, but more about being your own boss. So, and those can be two distinct things. I know lots of people that work from home that, they work for somebody. So yeah, that's kind of how you fit that in. It's really something that we admittedly, we kind of have to, we sort of struggle with, is that, we really have to tell ourselves, and we kind of have to schedule, no, we're going to take this time off. Fortunately, in many ways, we love the work we do. So that's helpful. And I don't want to get into the cliche. It's like, oh yeah, do what you love, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into that. Okay. But yeah, I mean, fortunately we love what we do. So I think that makes it a little bit easier. But it is just, you got to talk to each other. You got to have that communication, and you got to say, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. I mean, we go out to dinner, we go out to the movies, we do all these sorts of things. We visit people. I mean, it's not like we're always working. It's just that the work definitely, I only bring that up because we have the opposite problem that I think most people imagine, that you never get in, or you'd never be able to get any work done. It's quite the opposite. We're just working most of the time. And to some degree that makes, the times that we're not working makes them all the more special, more enjoyable, and we savor them a lot more, I think. As far as, I mean, you gotta make sure, like, okay, yeah, let's take 20 minutes to work out, or an hour to work out, or whatever. You've got to schedule it. You got to say, no, I got to do this. Like that's really, that's it. I mean, part of the answer is, or part of the question is, I guess, should be, are you your own boss? And if you are, then you can choose, the severity of how much, of your work. Okay, like, are you going to work really hard and get a ton of shit done inside of 4 hours so that you can have 8 hours the rest of the day to go do something? Or are you going to work 8 hours and then you only have 4 hours to do something? You get what I'm saying? But not everybody has that opportunity. So there's that. But then the other part is just, you got to talk to each other and just say, okay, yeah, we're going to work out today. And it's great, especially if, when you live with your significant other, you can be each other's support system, because like doing things like working out and whatever, I mean, it's easy enough to just sit or stand at a computer all day, and forget about that. But when you have each other, you can kind of, you can talk it over and you can work it out. It's like, okay, we got to work out at this point. And honestly, you can say to each other, hey, let's fuck tonight. Like, let's do this, let's make this happen or something. I will say this, and not saying that Stephanie and I, do this all the time, but if you want to get in a lot of sex in a relationship, like a work from home relationship like this, and where you're living together, if you can, if your schedule allows for it, get that sex on during the day, because at night it's just too easy or not, and it's understandable to feel tired and like, no, I don't want to do that, or I'll just have a cum or something, which, just jerking, both of you jerking and jilling off, it's a totally valid thing to do, laying next to each other or however you're going about it. But anyway, yeah, if you want to make sure you get in a lot of sex, you've got to get it in during the day and make it a part of, I don't know. I mean, Stephanie and I only eat once a day, so that's kind of different. But like, if you make it an after lunch thing, get the seduction going on and then, have a good fuck and then go back to work. I know some people have a hard time like going back to work after fucking. I mean, me, like there's the trope, right? That guys fall asleep or whatever. I mean, me, I'm excited. Like I don't just fall asleep after a fuck. I'm ready to go. I mean, for all kinds of things, if it's to go to work or if it's to fuck again, I'm ready to rock. But I know not everybody is, shall we say, that way. Cuddling, things like this, because there's kind of a list here: cuddling, talking, eating, all that. Cuddling, this one, I think it's good, and this can really help you out too. This is just another tip. I don't remember where I read it or if it was even bullshit, and I just heard it on some show and it was bullshit from that. But there was some theory that, you should try and get in 10 to 20 hugs a day with people you love. Be it kids or, significant other, partner, whatever. I kind of subscribe to that. And so I make it a point that whenever I can, as long as there isn't a meeting going on or something like this, to do, I'll kind of interrupt. I mean, very kindly, very softly. Just interrupt, whatever Stephanie has going on and just give her a hug. And I get in as many hugs as I can during the day. And believe me, that will endear so much connection. Even when, say, you're working in separate rooms, or even if you don't get to spend so much time throughout the day, it'll just, it'll keep the love juices flowing. I don't know exactly how to describe that. So get in as many hugs as you can, even if they just take a few seconds. And Stephanie does the same for me. She'll just come into the room and, just give me a nice hold, and it's great. So that's something else, really to do. So, but you just, as far as how do you make the time, you got to talk about it. You got to talk about it and say, these are the goals that I want. I mean, like, do you agree that both of you want to have lots of sex? Do you agree that both of you say want to work out or that you want to cuddle and all this? Talk about it, and you can both agree to it, and then, just kind of make it happen and keep reminding, each other about it. And I mean, if you're at the point where, frankly, like, if you get to a point, say, where, you're making plenty of money, I mean, then, you don't really have to, it's not even a matter of making time necessarily. Then it's just like, okay, well, what do you want to do now? But anyway, that's besides the point. So working from home, that's what I recommend, because you're right. I mean, it's tough for Stephanie and I, because like we actually like to go visit, even, we'll go stay at places in New Hampshire. We won't even go for like long, vacation. We won't go to like remote vacations or anything. Just somewhere else in New Hampshire, because the home is the office. And so to get away from the office, is really rejuvenating. It's really regenerating. So that, that's something to consider too, is that take vacations. You don't have to go far. Hell, you could even stay in town. Just go stay at a hotel or a motel or something. And I mean, especially if you go to a motel, you can make that very exciting. I mean, you really can. And if you can do it once a month, great. Or even once a season, once a season being, quarterly, winter, fall, whatever. That's really the way to go, in my opinion, is take those vacations, even if it's just 2-3 days. Do it. Get away from the house for a little while. You don't have to go far, but get away. That really helps, keep things going. So now, I mean, other than like obviously I wish I was making a lot more money, and I wish I didn't have to spend so much time. Like, I wouldn't trade the way things are going, and I certainly wouldn't trade my relationship for anything. I mean, it's just, it's wonderful. Understand when I'm saying, I work a lot, and if I ever complain about that, like, at the same time, I love the conditions that I exist within. So anyway, and hopefully email or messenger, I hope it's the same for you. So anyway, okay, I think that's enough on that. Now I want to touch on, let's change it up a little. So this past week, in the most recent, was it episode 6 or episode 7? It was Orgies in the Graveyard was the episode of it. I know that. But in the episode of Sex and Science Hour, I talked about Max Stirner during the after show where we cover the Amazon purchases, because somebody bought Max Stirner's The Ego in Its Own. And Stephanie asked me to sum up as quickly as I could, like, what is Max Stirner getting at? What is he pushing or putting out there? And so I talked about that. And I've talked about Max Stirner for years. I talked about it back when I was on Free Talk Live years ago. I said The Ego in Its Own is the best book on anarchism available today. There might be one better out there. There might be one that's on par. How about I say that? And I think I mentioned it during the Sex and Science Hour episode, but it's Michel Onfray's the Hedonist Manifesto is just a brilliant little book. And in fact, he uses one of his examples of how to organize as anarchists is the union of egoists, which is what Max Stirner talks about in The Ego in Its Own. And he said, like, this is just the most brilliant, organizational tool that's ever been devised. And I agree. I've been saying that forever, is that, no, the way you set up any kind of society is through a union of egoists, which can vary in size. It doesn't have to be, it could be small, it could be large. But you do it under the auspices of what a union of egoists, means. So anyway, the question I got about Max Stirner, because I do talk so prominently about him, was on Twitter, and I'll answer it here. Would you consider Max Stirner a libertarian, even though property rights wasn't part of his philosophy, which emphasizes individuality? So that's a great question to bring up. Okay, so first off, like, Stirner isn't perfect. Who is? But like, even egoism, which is egoist anarchism, which is Stirner's philosophy, still is left with much to be desired. And I think everybody kind of knows that. And that's why so many people point to The Ego in Its Own as like just this foundational text that everybody sort of builds off of. Like even Marx built off of it. Rothbard even built off of it. Benjamin Tucker built off of it. Lots of people built off of, off of Stirner's works. And they give credit where credit's due. Now, of course, sometimes when these people build off of it, I think they severely misinterpret, what Stirner had to say. But regardless, he is a foundational kind of character, sort of like a Herbert Spencer, right? Herbert Spencer is another character who I also enjoy, and interestingly, also was very wishy-washy on property rights, but who gets pointed at as in many ways the first libertarian and gets held up as, like an incredible philosopher, among other things. So now, would I consider Max Stirner libertarian? No, I would not. Now, let's be clear, to address the more specifics of this, quick Twitter question. Max Stirner's stance on property rights is that he didn't hold a hard dogma on them. Okay, and that's almost his exact words, is that he didn't have a hard dogma. Now, that doesn't mean that he didn't think property rights weren't useful. His concern is that property rights, and I'll tell you something, I agree with this, and I've talked about it before on Sovereign Tech, is that property rights can become their own tyranny. Like, property rights can become such a big deal, like that they can become, or, they can be held up as a god. And I think a lot of libertarians and anarcho-capitalists do this. To where they become harmful to human growth and the human condition in general, and harmful to the individual. I think, and this is kind of, for me, kind of my jumping off point on contracts, is that what happens with contracts is when everything is based upon, voluntary contracts, well, even if they're voluntary, who's the enforcement body? And also, like, how do you agree on these various contracts? Like, the example that I give often enough is that if you have land, now there's kind of an answer to this, but I'm going to give the example. Okay, is that, and this is based off of a comedic story that people tell, but this is what I use to explain it. Okay, if somebody bought land from some, I don't know, Libertarian Landowners Incorporated or some bullshit, okay? You bought it from them, you go to that land, and and you find that there's like some kind of a squatter or somebody perhaps that has been developing there. Maybe it's like 50 some odd acres, some crazy amount of acreage, and there's somebody that's been working, living there and working there, I don't know, for 10, 20 years. The time frame really doesn't matter. And you go up to him and say to him, hey, I bought this land from Libertarian Landowners Incorporated. Get the hell off of my property. Okay, but did this guy, did this squatter, we'll say, whatever, like, did he agree to that? And in fact, like, what's the situation here? Like, what's the deal? Like, if this guy's on there and he's developed and all this stuff, I mean, then you run into homesteading issues and all this, it becomes an interesting philosophical problem. And the answer to that is that in some ways the answer for ANCAPs or for libertarians is that, Libertarian Landowners Incorporated would, there'd be an escrow, as in there'd be a penalty if he found out within, say, a certain amount of time that the land he was getting was not what Libertarian, that the individual was buying from Libertarian Landowners Incorporated was not what Libertarian Landowners Incorporated described. Okay, so you could set up maybe like a multi-sig cryptocurrency. We're talking about libertarian paradise here. Okay, you could set up some kind of multi-sig where that person would get their money back, or they'd get some kind of deposit back or something once he finds out, oh shit, there's this guy on here, I don't want to kick him out, or this isn't exactly what I signed up for. However, it all shapes up. Like that's sort of how you would do that. Is technologically, that's how that would get solved. But what if the guy doesn't want to give it up? Like, who does that really belong to? Does it belong to did it originally belong to Libertarian Landowners Inc. just because they said so? And like, if this guy is on the land, like, how do you get rid of this guy? What if the guy says, no, I want, what if he calls up the individual that bought the land, that has the title, that has the contract, calls up Libertarian Landowners Inc. and says, you need to get this guy off the fucking property. So then you have to have an enforcement body around that contract. But the guy that's on the property, he didn't agree to that shit. And there's no requirement for him to agree to that stuff. Unless you're going to start building fences everywhere and, I don't know, laser fences or something to, to keep all these. I mean, it turns. I think you can see where this is going. While there are some degree of solutions, I think that could be done that allow for a peaceful resolution, there's other solutions that lend itself to tyranny, in my opinion. Because you're going to have an enforcement body around, like, say, contracts and all this different stuff. And contracts, is to some people is like the basis of how, private property would work, in a libertarian paradise. That's how it would be arbitrated, whatever else. Okay, but that enforcement body becomes a really big issue. And this is a huge issue with, lots of people are trying to get into this. Ethereum, BitNation, like there's a ton of blockchain projects that are trying to get into where, they are, they're becoming the contract organization in all this. And so it's like, oh, okay, so you can put your land title on Ethereum. All right, who's enforcing that land title? Ethereum drones? It becomes a huge issue. Like, there aren't exactly answers for that. So that's where I agree with Max Stirner, that with property rights, while he wasn't against them, he didn't have, like I said, he didn't have a hard dogma, or he didn't want them to be a hard dogma, because he envisioned, and I think properly, how they could be used, how property rights could become its own form of tyranny against the individual. This conversation could go on forever, because we could talk about how, what exactly, okay, as long as it's voluntary, right? That's what everybody gets all hot and bothered about. Hey, well, if they signed it, that's it. It's over. They turned it over. What define coercion? Like define voluntary. Like like manipulation. When does that come into play? There's a lot. There's a whole. Libertarians and ANCAPs try to make the stuff so cut and dry. They try to think, well, it's simple. It's simple. When these things are incredibly complex, and often, really, the only way you can handle any situation is case by case. You can disagree with me. That's okay. I don't mind if people disagree with me. All right. But I'm just saying that there's, a lot of things that I hear as far as being solutions that doesn't sound very free to me. That doesn't sound very voluntary to me, or I can see where it wouldn't exactly be voluntary. And in those cases, it becomes very problematic. Let me describe this. So, like I said, I self-describe as an egoist anarchist, just because it's the best term around. That I can run with. And I don't really have, there was a time where I would have called myself an anarcho-capitalist, I suppose. I don't really necessarily have a problem with a lot of the basic tenets of anarcho-capitalism. My problem with anarcho-capitalism is, first off, is the solutions that get laid out. I think they're terrible. I really haven't heard any good ones. Not really. For okay, well, how do we handle things in a stateless society? Every book that I've read, and I've read most of them, especially from ANCAPs, including lesser-known authors that are moronic, the solutions are horrendous. They're terrible. They are just set up for exploitation, which is exactly what people say is the problem with capitalism, is that it exploits. And it's like, well, yeah, honestly, even under anarcho-capitalism, even though they say, well, no, you can have blah, 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 you can do this under anarcho-capitalism, it's all going to be fine, blah, blah, woo, paradise. Even though they say that, it's so set up for exploitation. And honestly, when you look at so many of the people, not all, I know lots of great people that call themselves anarcho-capitalists, I really do. But the people that have any kind of, say, mouthpiece, they're scum. They are the scum of the fucking earth, or they're just stupid. I don't know many of them that I have a whole lot of respect for. They are so bad. You read their posts and it's like, wow, or even follow them on social media and the trauma's on display. It's like you're telling people how to act when, if we ever get to a stateless society, you're saying this is how things should be, or you could do this, or you could do that. And baby, you don't have shit figured out. And it's so readily apparent that you don't. It's so bad. So, anarcho-capitalism at its base level, I guess, is fine. I'm not saying that it's the best system out there, but okay. But the people, the solutions that get talked about, oh, fuck that. Don't sign me up to like be associated with those assholes. Oof. So, anyway, I would. I got in a bit of a tirade. I would not describe Max Stirner as a libertarian. Libertarianism owes Max Stirner a debt. Not like an actual debt. They don't have to give him any gold or Bitcoin. Okay, not that they could, but like libertarianism is certainly a step on the shoulders that is Max Stirner. That is the ego in its own. And all that said, like. And I think I talked about this at the end of last week's Sex and Science Hour. Like, I worry because in my opinion, there are a lot of people that absolutely do not get the ego in its own. They do not get egoism. They do not get Max Stirner. I don't know if they only read half the book or what happened, but they are missing the boat, like, all the way. They really are. Now, if you want me to quickly, I guess, get into what exactly, this is what I got it, and we got some email about it, because the way I described, how would I describe egoist anarchism? How would I describe what Max Stirner is pushing? I tried to make it as short as I could, but it's practically impossible to make it really short. And it might not sound pretty or appealing in very short form. There's a reason the ego in its own is such a massive tome. It's such a huge book. Is because there's so much to cover. Like, you have to break down all the spooks, which spooks are spooks are effectively saying, no, this isn't rooted in science or reality. This doesn't actually exist. Like, government is a spook. Religion is a spook. All kinds of things. There's lots of people that honestly are spooks in a very real way, or at least what they espouse is what they say spooky. So, you have the concept of spooks. You have the union of egoists, which the union of egoists is that you have a common goal, okay, or a shared goal that you're trying to achieve with other people, okay? And if at any point, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a goal, but, maybe you have a shared standard that you're uplifting, that you're promoting, that you're wanting to live. But here's the rub, is that anybody has to be able to leave that at any given time with no consequence. Like they need to be able to leave that intact, and then the union is broken thereafter. Okay, this is kind of the thing. This gets back to like some ideas for blockchains, where people are like, oh yeah, we want to make digital citizenship and all this different stuff. And it's like, okay, well, what if I want to move from Ethereum to another blockchain? Can I take my stuff over? Or will we end up like with what happened with Ripple, where when somebody wants to cash out and it's a whole lot of money, no, you're going to crash the system. We can't let you do that, buddy. Sorry. You can't just leave. And so then, blockchain or digital citizenship becomes, again, it becomes kind of its own little tyranny, right? Because you can't just walk away, even if it's private and voluntary. That becomes problematic. So the union of egoists is so important to study. And I think any form of anarchism can make use of that. You don't have to be an egoist, to take advantage of the union of egoists. In fact, I did a write-up about this on zog.ninja on my website at one point. Like Elon Musk, not that I want to give him any credit, but he was talking about how he thinks businesses should be set up and all this. And his idea for the best way a business to run was effectively a union of egoists. And other people have kind of set have espoused similar ideas. Sociocracy, some others, where it's kind of a union of egoists and all this. So that's a great idea. That's something that you can take anywhere. So you have the spooks, you have union of egoists. oh man, there's like so many different concepts to get into. But at the base level, and this is what I said on Section Science Hour that some people emailed about, and I'll just kind of address it here. Again, I was trying to be short, so you can't really get into the nitty-gritty of what everything means. But effectively, egoist anarchism is just saying, look, the individual is the thing that matters. Everything else is absolutely secondary. All that matters is the ineffable, the individual, and what that is. Okay, so nations don't matter. Your religion doesn't matter. Your morals, honestly, don't matter. And it's true, morality. Where is morality in science? I mean, yeah, there's things like empathy in science, sure. Like, rats have empathy. I mean, you can go down that sort of stuff. But like, where is the idea, where is various morality, or where is like the concept of rights? Like the right to bear arms. What are you talking about? Like, where in science is it that, what is the scientific proof that you have the right to a gun or a sword? There is no scientific, that right doesn't exist. Okay, I'm not saying it's I'm not saying it's an evil thing. I'm just saying that, let's be clear here, it is like money, to where it's something that everybody's just sort of agreeing upon, or at least some people are agreeing upon. But it's not something that if you were, 2-3 people stranded on a desert island, the rest of humanity was gone or something like that, like, okay, where does the right come from? To where like you absolutely must have a gun or something like, or not that you must have, but you know what I mean. Or like even privacy, like what is the scientific basis for that? Now, I mean, you can say that privacy is better off, the ability to have privacy is great for the human condition, sure, but where is the concept that humans must have this, or you get to start shooting and offing other people? Right? Because that's the ultimate end of rights infringement. Where is that? It doesn't exist. That's why you have to base rights on God, or some people like to base it on humanity. But again, where in your biological code, does it say I am guaranteed this? It's not there. I'm not saying they're bad ideas. They're great ideas. Yes, I think people should have the liberty of privacy. I don't like to use the word rights. I think people should have the liberty to own whatever property, that they can get their hands on, whatever. Okay, if that ends up being a gun or something like that, fine. It's a property issue. Okay, all these different things. I think they're great, but let's be clear that it's a human construct. It's not a part of the universe. Okay, and so that's what Max Stirner is getting at when he talks about spooks and all these other things, or when he talks about how there shouldn't be property rights, or not that there shouldn't be, but that, property rights, be careful with those. Or when he talks about like there is no morality. Right, there isn't. Like the universe doesn't have a government, to tell people what to do, or, I mean, like there's... Oh, it's such see what I mean? It's so tough to kind of talk about this, but I hope you get my point. Now, that doesn't mean you're a nihilist either. That just means that to some degree, I hate to use this term because that's what everybody says whenever they say they're not this. Okay, but you are being a realist in that, no, there is, like, you can't measure the right to privacy scientifically. Okay, so it doesn't exist. Anyway, so, that's where that sort of thing comes in. And I'm going into overtime. I don't want to spend too much longer on this. So, but my description is that Max Stirner, egoist anarchism is effectively that might is right. Okay, meaning that whatever the individual can do, he can do. But, and this is where I think people forget, is they don't read what Max Stirner has to say about love. Because he talks about how I feel, and he's describing empathy, whether he realizes it or not. I feel what my brother feels. I feel not literally, or not like some kind of quantum entanglement, but just in the fact that you have empathy. You know what another human feels. Okay, that's as long as you still have empathy anyway, which I think anybody can work those muscles. So you don't want to hurt another human because that's how you want to be treated, right? It's the golden rule or the platinum rule, whichever one you want to run with. I like the platinum rule a little bit better. So yeah, might is right, But at the same time, might is, like I said, tempered by love and empathy. Okay, and that's how you empower the individual. Now, you can do unions of egoists all you want that have perhaps little rules or little agreed upon ideas or whatever that go beyond that in how individuals are going to treat each other. Okay, but at the very base level, you have this very simple individual. I mean, you really do have a simplicity in that the individual is everything. You are the most important thing in the universe, but so am I. We're equally, because we're individuals, we're equally, all of valid import. And you can treat each other as such. Okay, so because you hear might is right and you start freaking out. It's like, what the fuck is this? What are you talking about? Oh, this is terrible. So the government's legitimate? Not at all. The government is absolutely illegitimate. The individual is the only thing that's legitimate. Okay? So, but then you got, we have the problem where people are reenacting traumas, and all this different stuff to where they don't treat themselves or other individuals in the way that that is most effective most effective for human growth and for human happiness, which happiness is the ultimate goal, which is another huge part of what Max Stirner has to say. So that's not like a utilitarian argument necessarily, even though utilitarianism has a really bad rap as well, that people don't understand when they read Bentham or Mill. They don't quite get the nuance of what they were talking about when they talk about utilitarianism. Not saying I'm a utilitarianist or whatever whatever you want to call that. But again, it all comes down to the fact that a lot of people really just know this stuff or know of these ideas or think of these terms, and they know it based upon how someone else analyzed it and not based upon their own research. That goes true for Max Stirner. That goes true for all, like I just mentioned, maybe even Bentham and Mill or Nietzsche, or I mentioned Michel Onfray earlier. I mean, a bunch of people, like they never actually read, or they never read Marx, or, I said this in a recent Patreon episode. It's like, look, there's really more than one communism. Guess what? I know you want to lump it all up into one, but just like how there's a bunch of different ways that capitalism gets used, and some of those, anarcho-capitalists would say is improper, right? Like there's crony capitalism. Well, guess what? There's crony communism. Okay, not everybody agrees with Marx. There's lots of communists who more, are in the camp of, Bakunin and Peter Kropotkin, which Kropotkin's work is phenomenal. I mean, a lot of what he has to say, I hope every capitalist reads that shit and takes it to heart, because he's right in a lot of what he has to say. And how we treat each other as humans and all this. So, there's multiple forms of that, but most people don't know. They just think, communist. Give me a break. And I'm not even a communist, but that doesn't mean I'm not intrigued by what these people actually think. Instead of just listening to, and with all due respect, because I love her work, instead of just listening to, looking at it all through the lens of Ayn Rand, or through the lens of Rothbard, or through the lens of Woods, or some other dipshit. I mean, if you want to trust them, fine. But guess what? You might find out that people think differently than the way that some of these other versions of anarchism get parlayed. Like that they don't know. Actually, they don't subscribe to the way that Woods describes it, or the way that Rothbard describes it, or the way that, even Mises describes it. Even though Mises is, a lot of socialists actually really like Mises. I bet you didn't know that. They do. But anyway, I've gone on too long with this. So, question everything. That's the order of the day. Question everything. I hope that kind of explains it. Yeah. So, I mean, just again in brief, Max Stirner, not a libertarian. Yes, libertarians have learned a lot from him. Just like Herbert Spencer, I really don't think he's a libertarian. Not the libertarianism that Americans talk about. Libertarianism originally, in its original use, was actually a term for communists. It was not a term for capitalists. So you could say there may be more libertarians in that way, but again, Stirner, as much as even some of Stirner's fans say to the opposite, Stirner wasn't espousing any kind of culture, any kind of economy, really. He was just saying, look, you have to hold up the individual and the individual alone, the ineffable one, and that being you particularly. So there you have it. I hope I explained that in some kind of fashion that made sense for you. But you can ask more specific questions if you want. And please, if you disagree with anything I'm saying, message me. Okay? Maybe you can change my mind. I actually have a very open mind. Okay? That's why I'm willing to read books from people that are part of either economic persuasions or philosophical persuasions that I don't share. As to where, in my opinion, I see a lot of, ANCAPs or libertarians, and they are so fucking closed-minded. And of course, whenever you call them out on it, it's like, well, don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out. To quote another asshat, that is not an argument, and it's not. That's horseshit. So, anyway. And I don't like to quote the person that I just quoted because not a fan. But anyway, there we go. Enough of that. We'll do some Q&A next week. I don't think I'm going to be able to get out another episode this week. Things are just too busy. I'm working with the free Rossathon, so I don't. A lot of my time this week has been taken up with that, and that's going to be happening on Sunday, December 4th. If you want to attend that, of course, you can go to freeross.org. They didn't pay me to talk about it. I'm just saying that I'm volunteering, working for it. So there you go. They need a tech guy. And whenever somebody says, hey, we need a tech guy in the liberty movement, in anarchism, guess who gets called? The Golden Stallion, every single time. And I think actually next week, it looks like I'm going to be on Declare Your Independence with Ernie Hancock, which I've been on that a few times now. But he wants to talk about encrypted communications, which is a great subject to talk about, and I'm happy to talk about it. So I'll keep you posted. You can follow me on Twitter or wherever else to find out when I'm going to be on for that. But if afterwards I usually release shows like that, I release it as a Patreon episode, and usually I give you a little exclusive commentary for it. Anyway, enough. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.